are.
Priorities.
Yes, there are.
Okay, we can get started.
And people can watch. So can you imagine?
Okay. Got to wait for us to get solid there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 6 o'clock.
Hmm.
6:30.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Northampton County Council meeting of July 6, 2017 to order. Please all rise for a moment of silent prayer. Thank you, and now please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Zembo, can we call the roll?
Mr. Bennell?
Here.
Mr. Kuzic?
Present.
Mr. Dees?
Here.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Here.
Mr. Geisinger?
Present.
Mr. Kraft?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Borman?
Here.
And Mr. Warren?
Here.
All present.
All present this evening. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the June 15th, 2017 meeting. Moved by moved by Mr. Werner to approve by acclamation, seconded by Mr. Kraft. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Passes unanimously. Next item is courtesy of the floor. We had no one signed up. Is there any person or persons that would like to address council this evening? No, there being none, we will move into the controller's report. I do not see Mr. Barron, and he did not submit a written report. Next is the county executive's report. Mr. Brown is not here. Ms. Allen, did you have anything to report? Okay, so there is no county executive's report. We will move then into old business. First item is a public hearing on the ordinance titled An Ordinance Amending the Northampton County Administrative Code, Article 13, Procurement and Disposition of County Property, Section 13.16 Contracts and Agreements, C1. This ordinance would amend, let's see, item 1, we would strike $100,000 and reduce that to $25,000 for competitive negotiation after competitive sealed bidding and non-competitive negotiation source selection methods. And at this time, I would like to conduct the public hearing on the ordinance. Is there any member of the public that would like to address council regarding the proposed ordinance? There being none, Mr. Durkin would like to address council regarding the ordinance. Very good.
Okay, I'll read it verbatim. My thoughts for County Council. I provided some insight for the ordinance changing all contracts with expenditures over $25K to be approved by Council. This will negatively impact the contracting process and the efficiency of the procurement division. If all contracts will still be required to be reviewed at the Finance Committee meeting prior to full Council vote, then an additional meetings may be warranted, as one meeting a month will no longer be adequate. The Administrative Code states that all contracts which are awarded through the invitation to bid method of sole source selection must be awarded within 60 days of the bid opening. Since invitations to bid previously did not need council approval, regardless of the contract amount, this was not a problem except for times when the funding source was other than the general fund. This was the case for the interior renovation construction contracts for Louise Moore Park. Because of timing issues, procurement was required to cancel all bids since the 60-day deadline was surpassed, and procurement is subject to the controller's audit of compliance with the Administrative Code. Ultimately, all divisions/departments will be impacted by the constraint on procurement's ability to obtain goods and services in a timely manner resulting from delays caused by the requirement for additional approvals. The efficiency of the procurement division will be further challenged by this delay at the time of award. The bidding/contracting process is already crippled by the requirements of the administrative code regarding, including notifying council 30 days before issuing an RFP. Any solicitation must be on the street for 30 days, and advertisement no less than 10 days and no more than 30 days till bid opening. Coupled with time frames for the division/department reviews and recommendation for award. There are times when we are close to the 60-day deadline. I don't agree that we need to restrict all contracts. There's additional information that's non-responsive to the issue before council, but that's the totality of her comments on the issue before you. I would only add to it that Mr. Brown is not here this evening, and I think to the extent that this would render an exceptional constraint on the ability that not only he has to do business, the administration has to do business, but the entirety of the county has to do business, the matter should be postponed until a time when Mr. Brown is here to make a full-throated defense of his position, which I'm certain is contrary to this ordinance.
Member of the public that would like to address council? If you could state your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Jeff Fox from the beautiful borough of Penarchel, Pennsylvania,
Utopia.
which smells wonderful this time of year. I just want to say, once Mr. Dricken read that, I wanted to, you have the opinion, the perspective of an employee. However, from a perspective of a taxpayer, my assumption is that this ordinance was in response to Mr. Brown's contract with whatever, DOR or whatever, but and that process. And number one, my assumption is that this provides more transparency, lowering the cost ceiling. And my number one, Mr. Brown knew very well that this council meeting was tonight and what was on the agenda. So he had every opportunity to be here and say what he wanted to say. And number two, from a taxpayer's perspective, I just wanted to say that I think transparency is important. Efficiency is important, but I think transparency is extremely important. And from that perspective, I just wanted to bring that perspective. Since you got one perspective, I wanted to voice my perspective as well. And so thank you for letting me do that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public or the administration, an additional comment? If you could please the microphone for the record.
Catherine Anderson is the head of procurement for the county. I've had the great fortune to work with her on a couple of things. She is probably one of the most skilled employees at this county. I think she would not have submitted something as strong as this were she not absolutely convinced that this serves not only the interests of efficiency but transparency. I'm not sure, respectfully, that the connection was made there between transparency and limitation to $25,000. I would reiterate that this is something that should be addressed and vetted completely with Mr. Brown here.
Anyone else? Okay, members of council would like to comment, or Mr. Kraft?
Yeah, listen, we've been down this road many times, and, you know, it always seems to come up on an election year for some reason. This is a ridiculous overreach by county council, in my opinion. To drop this down to 25, we dropped it from 250, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 300, 250, whatever it was in the beginning, down to 100, and 100 even bumps up into things. I mean, you have three different distinct parts of government here. You have the executive branch, who's, you know, hired by the people to run the government. You have us to pass a budget and to make sure the budget's in that constraint, and you have the judges. I mean, we're not here to micromanage everything that happens. As far as transparency, to Mr. Fox's comment, everything that comes through, any bid, anything comes through on a piece of paper. I don't know how more transparent you can be. I don't know what anybody's hiding from anybody. And if we got ourselves in a dither here because, Mr. Brown went and didn't get, 3 bids for that project for the prison, just hold them to the administrative code. This is overreaching. This is way overreaching for a county. For this body to do this is going to stop us dead in our tracks. We'll be here 5 meetings a month, maybe more sometimes. We'll open those if we get a quorum when we need to have them to pass these things. So I strongly urge every member, and I know I'm agreeing with the opposite party and all, but I strongly urge everybody here to vote this down or withdraw their support as a second for this.
Mr. Geisinger, you had a comment?
I do, and it's in response to Mr. Fox's concern, who I respect greatly. Per a decision that's in front of us, per Mr. Lauer, the executive order that was originally submitted into the contract that you are referencing was resubmitted by the administration with clarifying language that then brought it in accordance with the administrative code, which settles a lot, I think, of our concern in response is if this particular ordinance was a response to that particular contract. Okay. Now, having said that, I do believe that when we look at what the professionals who are charged with running the county on a day-to-day basis and are responsible for ensuring the smooth transition and operation of the county on a day-to-day basis need to do in order to make sure that contracts are properly executed, they're executed in a timely manner, that the bids are done in a timely manner. I think we've done that, and I think a $100,000 limit on a contract is not an unreasonable amount. Lowering that amount, in my opinion, will hinder the ability of this county to move forward quickly, to operate appropriately with the projects in front of it, and therefore I do not support lowering the amount, though I do agree that it is our responsibility to continue to make sure that the administration is transparent in its operations.
Mrs. Ferraro?
In councils through the years, this issue has come up different times. And then after study and deliberation and talking to the people involved with doing these processes every day, working here in the county, it was realized that the $100,000 threshold that we passed was okay, feasible. But anything less than that would almost bring the wheels of government to a halt. You would be here for many meetings, and the wheels of government move slowly enough sometimes. And I think when we change the threshold to the $100,000, I think we accomplished what we wanted to do with that. Going beyond that, and it was debated through the years, other times, 75,000, 25. Those numbers were thrown around through the years and finally arrived at the 100, which seems to have a comfort level. So this, I just couldn't possibly support this.
Mr. Dietz?
Well, I guess I don't agree with the philosophy that the government would slow down. I mean, Lehigh County does it with $10,000. and that's, so I spoke to Lehigh County and both their controller and even our controller in Northampton County, and each of them felt that $10,000 or $25,000 would not hinder the function of the county government. So,
Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, this is talking about for competitive negotiation type contracts, negotiations after competitive sealed bid, and non-competitive negotiations. That reducing that from $100,000 to $25,000, I think, based on, I know Ken doesn't want to hear Lehigh County, but Lehigh County's at $10,000. I talked to their controller. We talked to Mr. Barron. $25,000 is workable. What it wouldn't impact, projects funded with monies outside of the general fund, right? Because that would still have to go through council. All small purchases, anything for the cooperative purchasing. So I've heard this argument: we will have to come to council to buy typewriter paper. Well, no, you don't have to, or copy paper. You don't, because we have a cooperative purchase agreement with the state, and we don't go individually for that. So that's like an omnibus contract. We don't have to do that. Professional services for our Court of Common Pleas. Somebody mentioned that. Court of Common Pleas are independent. They're paid through the state. They contract that through the state. I think most of the professional services for the Department of Human Services. This basically comes down to, what level of transparency are. I feel that getting council's approval at $25,000 is at a level I feel comfortable with. And to Ken's point that this is an election year stunt, I mean, I've been on this, from the beginning, but not from the beginning. That's for almost since I've been here, trying to get this through. We've almost got it through a couple times, and as far as being an election year, I mean, I've been mostly aligned on the Democrats on this. So I'm just saying that not that it makes a difference, but I'm a little, you got me offended that you think I'm doing this for political purposes. I'm not. This does not have anything to do with political purpose. This is just something that I've felt about, for the last 3 years. I think that for transparency, it should be at $25,000 worth versus $100,000.
Mr. Werner?
I respect all the opinions, but I'm going to come from a different angle, okay? We've asked this administration many times, when they come forward to talk about the contracts, to at least be honest and give this council a chance to review things, okay? Though the fact that we did have numbers in place, I believe had we had information given to us in a timely manner to review, we wouldn't have to play a game asking for a $28,000 or a $30,000 minimum, okay? I'm tired of having things placed in front of me with 2 or 3 days to review it, and I think you get to a point where you say, okay, follow the rules. Play by the rules of the charter. I was prepared to say, if you can't do that, then we will sue you. That's what we do. That's what council has the right to do. So in trying to put limits when we're actually putting blockades in front of our own council, okay, I am opposed to the fact that, one, administration doesn't respect the council's timeframes that we need, and two, that we have to come back with a $28,000 number to make sure we get our council executive to show transparency. So I'm going to sit back and listen to my colleagues talk, but I just wanted you to know my opinions.
Mr. Bennell?
I agree with Mr. Kraft. I don't know if I would use his verbiage, but we have been down this road before. I think this does hamstring the executive. I don't think it's council's job to micromanage. And I agree with Mr. Werner. Sometimes we do get information late and we're trying to play catch up, but you have to value what our head of procurement is saying. And again, for her to pen her letter, I mean, again, she couldn't be here, unfortunately, but, that to me weighs a lot. It's not the executive, giving his side of the argument. It's not somebody from council. It's somebody who works with procurement, who works with the contracts. And, with inflation, I guess you could even make the opposite argument, that maybe $100,000 isn't enough. But I just think dropping this to $25,000 is more of a knee-jerk reaction. I don't, again, we get late notice, but I don't think anything really has slipped past council that has been a surprise. There's not a contract that shows up that, we get here and we didn't know that it was put through. The channels of communication in that sense are pretty open. So I'm in favor of keeping it at $100,000. We go from there. And if we feel that the executive branch is circumventing the law, then we get with our solicitor. I agree with Mr. Werner. If we feel that there's a violation, then you have the right to sue. But this is, to me, more of a knee jerk, and I'm not in favor of it because I do think it would slow down the county government even more so than it already is.
Anyone else?
If I may have a follow-up.
Certainly.
On a follow-up, thank you, Mr. President. On a follow-up to that, I think the fact that the administrative code is in place and that it does work and that the administration recognized our concern with the prior contract and the wording in it as per what was resubmitted and then cleared by Mr. Lauer as being in accordance with Article 13, shows that it is working. The system does work. There is transparency. There is maybe not the communication we always want. I won't deny that. I agree that I think there are communication levels that should have been brought forward earlier. But that is not, in my opinion, reworking a communication issue between the administration and council is not a reason to lower a threshold that then hampers our ability to have procurement do its job effectively. And quite frankly, a $100,000 level for most contractual obligations is low. It is low. So I reiterate that I feel strongly that I think things are in place, they are appropriate, things are being done well, the transparency is there, we are protecting the taxpayer, and I want to continue to do that at the level that we're at.
I'll just add, too, I have enormous respect for Ms. Anderson. She's done a good job here and is terrific at what she does. But what I do want to say is that what some of the things that she mentioned in her letter indicate to me the need to review Article 13 of the Administrative Code and update it. I mean, these 60 days and 30 days, they were put into place when people did need typing paper and carbon copies of things. The time to look at those, like we did with the charter last year, with the some of the dates and postings, the time has come to upgrade and update Article 13 to reflect the technologies that we have available today that we did not have in 1977. So again, I'll make my plea to the administration. Let's find somebody, let's review that, and let's bring it up to date. And I do think that $25,000 is too low. Anything else? Hey, Ms. Zembo, Mr. Vaughn?
I just wanted to say, Glenn pretty much said everything I was going to say on his second retort, but I think this creates an unnecessary bottleneck within the procurement division, and I kind of agree with Mr. Kraft. I think we'll be here quite some time, and we may have challenges with, again, getting a quorum and possibly getting the Finance Committee to commence and to get these contracts pushed through. So that would be my biggest concern with this ordinance.
Okay. Anything else? We call for the vote then?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
No.
Mr. Geisinger?
No.
Mr. Kraft?
No.
Mr. Vaughn?
No.
Mr. Warner?
No.
Mr. Mennel?
No.
Mr. Goodrich?
No.
Fails by a vote of 2 to 7.
Fails by a vote of 2 to 7. We will move on. Next item under old business, consideration of Article 13 contract approval resolution, USA Architects. This resolution was tabled at the meeting held on May 18th, 2017. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to remove the resolution from the table.
I'll make that
There's a motion by Mr. Kraft, seconded by Mr. Werner. Now we will vote to remove it from the table.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Mennel?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Yes.
And Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 9 to 0.
So the resolution is removed from the table unanimously. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. All right. So just to refresh our memories, it says, now therefore be it resolved that the Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendation of the county executive as set forth in the attached documentation to approve an amendment to increase the contract total for architectural services for Louise Moore Park homestead renovation. And that was an increase of $28,000 for a total of $85,576. Okay. And at this time, we will entertain any discussion, or if the administration would like to make a comment regarding the resolution.
I'd like to thank you for untabling this. This is a project that has been very important to me, and I've been working very hard on it for several years. This change order was a request from the county to USA Architects. I have explained that. It's not that we're voting on the silo, the aesthetics, or anything else in here. We had requested this because the administration felt that we need a second egress that is much larger than the spiral stairs over there. We chose also to make it handicapped accessible with a stair glide going up those stairs for the second floor. This resolution here was work that USA Architects has done, did do it for us. Again, whether you want to like the aesthetics, like the idea, or not, that's not what we're voting on here today. We're voting to pay this bill that we requested USA Architects bring forward in that plan.
Okay.
So that's all.
Mr. Phillips, capital projects, have you reviewed this?
No. And the other thing is, when we tabled this, we said, when we tabled it, we said we would like to get a legal opinion as to whether the county would be exposed to a lawsuit under the ADA requirements if somebody could not get to the second floor, or would be grandfathered if there would be a grandfather exemption. And then last month, when this was brought up and we asked Mr. Lauer for a status report of that, Mr. Lauer advised he was asked to review the Americans with Disability Act with respect to the Lewis Moore homestead, and he had stated that he had started the process, but he had to be determined that was grandfather or not. He further advised he planned to ask Mr. Ryan Durkin, county solicitor, to consult with the county's insurance carrier. I mean, has that been resolved?
Not to the best of my knowledge, but again, Mr. Phillips, that's not what we're voting on here. We're voting on paying this bill so that I can get this rebid, and then you also have a choice to vote on this whole thing again as far as accepting the bid for the aesthetics, for the staircase, for everything else that's involved with the project. This particular resolution is to pay USA Architects for the work they've already done in designing what the administration requested. The ADA possibilities and such are, you know, if you choose down the road not to make this second egress for our employees, or to make the second floor of the Louise Moore House ADA accessible, that's another choice on another meeting once we get the bids.
So we, if I can, there was a change order that was 50% more.
Just one quick comment.
But that was our change order, not
This
theirs.
is $1 million job that we're talking about. It was 50% more of their original price, but we requested this be done on the walkthrough in Louise Moore before they put in their stuff.
So have they given us, I'm a little confused at this point. Is this to pay for the design for the exterior access to that building?
That is correct.
So they have done the design work for the silo?
That is correct.
Okay. So we're being asked to pay them to do the design work for the silo that, my understanding is, I don't think we're happy with the silo. I mean, is that where I'm at?
Yes, you have expressed
So we have no
unhappiness with the aesthetics of the silo.
So we have no bone to pick with, if that's the term, I think I'll use it anyway. We have no bone to pick with the architect because we've initiated that change order. They didn't come to us. We initiated that change order, and they have provided us with a product.
Yes, they
the
have.
design work.
You are correct.
Okay, so they've already given us something, they've done something for us per our instruction, and now we owe them this $28,000 for the design.
That is correct. The design that you do dislike, absolutely.
So we're going to pay them for a design we don't like.
We're paying them for a project that we enacted them to do. We've been over this for 2 hours the last time this came up. I mean, I don't know how much more we have to beat a dead horse here.
Mr. Werner, are you finished, or?
I was under the assumption that we were going to go back and talk to them about this.
That was Stan and Mr. Brown's assumption. I felt that we asked them to do a project here.
Yeah.
They gave us what we asked them for. Why should they have to discount their work that we requested? I don't quite understand that. So, no, I did not go back and ask them to reduce their price, because this is what we asked them to do, and they have provided us with the plan for a second egress, whether it's in a silo, whether we make it square, whether we don't make it at all. That's, again, a decision for another night. This is not, I'm not asking you for the authority to do this because we have to rebid the whole project at this point. I need the bid specs from these people because they have them all. I cannot get the bid specs to continue for the rebid until we pay this bill. We owe them this money, and we should be paying them this money, and that is what this resolution is about.
Okay, Mr. Bennell and then Mr. Dietz.
Actually, I think you were going first.
I'd say the only reason I voted the table was at that meeting we didn't know who initiated the change, and we were on the assumption that they had changed it and it was a 50% increase. So the fact that we changed it, I think they fulfilled their obligations for it. I think not being, whether or not we would like the design or not, I think that's all subjective, and I think they fulfilled their requirements of it. I don't necessarily think that they did a lazy job or something poor in designing it. That's just personal taste, whether or not we like it. So I do think that we should, pay this and then, decide going forward if that's what we want to do or not. But I do think they did their.
Let's vote.
Mr. Bennell, you had.
I'll give Mr. Kraft my second supportive comment. When this came up, the meeting this came up, there was a lot of misinformation, and yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm all right. And that I had made some derogatory comments about this company, and Mr. Kraft did say that when the facts came out, if it's true that they didn't do anything wrong, somebody should man up and apologize. So now that Ms. Allen has come forward, I think even at the last meeting, and told us what had happened, they didn't do anything wrong. So I will publicly apologize. So
I have apologized to them for all of you because it was a miscommunication and a misunderstanding. So they do not have any hard feelings. They simply want to continue with the project, as do I. And again, they're okay with it all. Thank you very much.
Mr. Geisinger, you.
Okay, I got to tell you, I'm in the service business. That's what I do for a living. So if my client comes to me and says, I want you to do something, and I present an option to them, if my client is not happy with the option I present to them, usually it's on me to absorb the time and energy I put into that until they're satisfied with that product. So I hear what you're telling me, but on the other end of this, I'm really torn on this because I get it. They've put time and energy and everything else into it. But the truth is that if we've paid them for up to a certain point, then why are they able to hold back anything from us at this point just because we haven't agreed to pay them on something that we're not happy with?
Well, now we have to start all over again. And I respect
get
what
that.
you're saying. These people did their job. I had to argue with them. They continued to say, we're grandfathered, you don't have to. Again, the administration is happy with the silo. I'm okay with it. At that moment, I was their client. So there's not a whole lot we can say. When we got to this meeting and I was across the hall at a personnel appeals board, I certainly wish they would have said, hey, get over here and explain what's going on, because this could have been all taken care of that night had I been able to explain it right then and there.
I agree. We've beaten this a couple of times around. I get that.
They've waited more than enough time for their money. They want to proceed with this project. They've done a good job. They've brought everything we asked them to bring to the table. Why we should take this off. This is going to be a longer-term project, and again, is $1 million project on this whole thing.
I get all of the above.
This is something that was started back in 2010, 2011. The county has wasted $750,000 on this particular project out of the Louise Moore Trust. $28,000 in the midst of this, ladies and gentlemen, is beyond my thought comprehension that we're arguing about this for the third meeting. So I don't have much more to say to defend this.
Well,
if you guys choose to not pay it, we will have to pay a loss.
With all due respect, I'm arguing with it because it's still $28,000.
I agree.
Okay? So whether it's $1 or $1 million, as we were just discussed in the contractual obligation, we have a responsibility to make sure that the taxpayers' money is spent appropriately. I get it comes out of the trust. I get it's not general fund money. But I also get the fact that when you look at it, if you, say the administration as the client, was happy with the design, or at least accepted the design as an acceptable rendering of what you gave them to do, then that does change the argument.
That's exactly what
Okay.
happened, again.
Frankly, I'm in total agreement with Mrs. Ferraro. I think it's ugly as hell. I would never take it. But I also get the fact that if you accepted it, then we do have a responsibility to authorize payment.
Thank you.
So,
Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call for the vote?
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferrara?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
No.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Warner?
No.
Mr. Bennell? Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 6 to
Passes by a vote of 6 to 3. That was all we had under old business. Is there any other old business to come before council this evening? Okay, there being none, we will move into new business. First item is consideration of a resolution setting the central booking center fee. And at this time, I'll call on Mr. Dietz to introduce the resolution.
All right, so now therefore be resolved, the Northampton County Council, that it hereby sets the central booking center fee at $300. This is a long conversation going back and forth of, we had a record of all the court fees that the county has adopted. We're not setting it. We're just basically accepting and acknowledging what they had put in there. And out of all the lists of the civil and court charges, this one was missing. So it was under solicitor and a lot of conversation that we should adopt it and put it on the books.
Yeah, I'll just ask Mr. Lauer, you were involved in this discussion, to explain to some individuals who may not understand why we are doing this and adopting this, what the reason for our action is of this resolution.
Well, there was some conflict between what's happened and what a reading of the administrative code would indicate should have happened. But regardless, we have had a situation that you've all discussed at length, and I won't bore you with that, but we have a situation where there is a booking fee being charged. The purpose of the fee, at least as it's enunciated in the agreements that were reached, is to pay for booking centers that solve time and personnel issues for the municipalities that use the booking centers. Council expressed some concerns for a couple of reasons. First of all, there is a provision in the charter which provides that fees are to be set in whatever way council decides they will be set. Subsequent to that, there was the adoption of an ordinance which said that council will set fees, this is a long time ago, will set fees by adopting resolutions. So the purpose of this resolution is to comply with not only the Home Rule Charter, but the procedure that was previously established years ago for setting fees, i.e. by a resolution. The next thing that you will hear about is the ordinance, which does more than that. It establishes, first of all, that there are to be fees for this, and also establishes some procedures that are to be followed with respect to what's done with the fees and how council is imposing limitations on how the fees should be used, how the fees should be paid for, and what happens if the booking centers don't actually pay for themselves. So there was a lot of discussion about the fact that county council from the beginning of the process hasn't been involved in it at all. Booking centers were established, fees were established, and clearly the judiciary has the right to do all of that. Council felt, and I assisted in preparing frankly, the ordinance more than the resolution, because you people felt, and I don't disagree, that if we are collecting this money to fund this service that's provided to municipalities, we ought to be keeping track of it. We ought to be making sure that it's paying for itself, and if it isn't, then the municipality should kick in. That's how we got to this point. Where you are on that is obviously up to you.
So you jumped
Mr. Kraft?
from what we were talking about, one consideration, right into the ordinance that we're doing next.
Well,
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
was talking about both.
Doing
yeah.
one at a time, though, right? So
Yes.
Okay.
I'm confused. So let's go back to number one, where we're at, the thing we're talking about right now, because we're not on two yet. And, were the courts asked what they wanted their fee at? Because they collect all this. This is all court.
They selected the fee.
They selected the fee, and they've been running with that fee forever.
To make it be $300.
And they did that
According
when?
to the Home Rule Charter, council has to establish fees for virtually anything, and we hadn't done that.
We
and-
established the fees for the courts? I thought the courts was a different branch of government.
Well, I think the question is this the courts?
Well, it's booking and jails, and they impose the fines, and they collect the fines, and they do everything with it. So, I mean, what purview does it have of the council when it's a court's function?
Because we adopt fee schedules. We already adopt fee schedules for a number of things
Okay.
that are done by the judiciary. It's not a question of us having control, but we have adopted fee schedules in the past that include things for the judiciary.
Right, trying to, pay for central booking. I just think, are the courts here? Is anybody from the courts here? I mean, I feel we should get input from them on this before we vote on anything.
If I may.
Well, we'll hear from
Okay.
them.
A lot tonight. One of the things that I looked into when we were looking at this, to your point, Ken, was Section 1721, Mr. Lauer. It delegates governmental units that have the power to set these fees, and the language is gray. I haven't had a chance to look into it at intense detail, but the first thing that I spotted, and I think this, may require some input from the courts, is whether we have to be, I guess the word triggered fits. The courts have to say, hey, we want you to do this. Because it looks to me like it's possible to make the argument that governmental units referenced in 42 PA-CSA, Section 1720, going all the way forward, that refers to governmental units that are part of the judicial system as opposed to just governmental units generally. But I'm not certain, and I have not had a chance to look at case law. This issue just came in front of me yesterday. But that was the only issue that we had in looking at it, was whether the courts need to be involved in the process under the Pennsylvania State Code.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify, I don't have a problem with having this ordinance, but I want to have, input from the courts on, and whether they're separate entities of government who's charging this fee. So if I could, I'd like the motion for a table of this until we get that information from everybody else that we need. I'm not against, having it. If it's got to be in our code, I have no problem with it, but I think there's three branches of government here again, and there's a question from the administration, and it's a little gray, and I don't want to do something that, put the cart in front of the horse.
We have a motion. Is there a second to that?
Wait, well, okay.
Do we have a second?
Wait, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to make comment, but you made a second on the table, so all
Would you
debate
like
is
to
finished.
withdraw
but-
your
I'll withdraw
second?
my second so
Okay.
you can speak.
I think that what we first, I think the original point was that there are two different items in discussion here. And the first is the consideration of a resolution, basically just agreeing with a fee that the court has already set. Okay?
Yeah,
Whether
which I don't have a
whether
problem
we
with.
or should have the authority or not, in the past, we have passed resolutions for fees.
Yeah.
It is a resolution, not an ordinance. So in the first part, I see no issue with debating and whether accepting or not accepting, but essentially just agreeing that the court's fee of $300 is appropriate and that this body therefore resolves so. Okay, done. As far as the second part
Yeah, we're
goes,
not on
though,
two yet.
well, as far as the second part goes, I would agree with you, though, which would then lead into Mr. Werner's question. At that point, I think we can discuss whether or not we wish to table the measure, because I agree with you. I think that would
Right.
require court input.
Yeah, well, okay, so, maybe we should just table 1 and 2 until we get the input
Well-
and get it. I don't want to do anything twice or 3
Yeah.
times here.
If I could just, add to this, because I did work with Mr. Dietz on this and Mr. Lauer as well. Essentially, all we are doing is adding a fee that the court has recommended to our fee schedule.
Right.
We have a schedule of fees for the Recorder of Deeds, the Register of Wills, the Orphans Court, and criminal and civil. We have not added this item to the criminal and civil list of fees. All this resolution would do is add it to that list of fees. Beyond that, where we're spending it, I think that's where you're getting into the ordinance, and that's something for 2 weeks from now. But the resolution that's before us would simply add something that the courts have already instated to our fee schedule for the criminal division.
I just have one thing. I know that this is what you're talking about.
Mhm.
I understand that fully. And being very active with the civil and criminal and all those departments myself, these are fees that are sometimes changed by the judges,
Mhm.
sometimes dismissed. The DA is involved in this
Mhm.
also. As Mr. Kraft is intimating, I would agree with him that we table the whole thing until we can get the consensus or discussion at least with the courts and the DA's office. I just don't think that adopting these, maybe they're ready to change them. We don't know what their take on this or their whole overarching idea is, but I do think that without those two other branches in the mix here, Mr. Morganelli and Judge Barada and Court Administration, I think that we are being, as he said, stepping before the cart before the horse.
I disagree.
Mr. Phillips.
I second Mr. Kraft's request to table it.
1 and 2.
Excuse me?
1 and 2.
Let's do.
We'll
Two
do it
is
one
not
at a time.
introduced.
Two is not
Yeah,
introduced.
it has not been
Can't table
introduced.
Okay, I'm tabling number 1 right now until,
Okay, so
Then
we
we
have
have a second.
a motion to table number 1 and seconded by Mr. Phillips. Okay, Ms.
Mr.
Zimmer?
Kraft?
yes?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
No.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
No.
Mr. Kuzic?
No.
Mr. Dietz?
No.
Mrs. Ferrara?
Yes.
And Mr. Geisinger?
No.
No, not tabled.
Fails by a vote of 4 to 5.
Motion to table fails by a vote of 4 to 5. Any further discussion then on the fee schedule addition?
You and I conversed about, I'm going to have a courts and corrections meeting. I asked Judge Daly to give us an update on the drug and alcohol courts. I would make the suggestion that I could put this on that agenda and have it discussed at that meeting, so when we get to the next council meeting, it'll already be vetted.
We voted to not table as well.
And it's not tabled, so it should be able to be discussed.
Well, we would be discussing the ordinance at that time. But again, all this does is add it to our fee schedule
And
that we already have for everything else in criminal and civil.
Yeah,
We
but-
are not changing anything, we are affirming something
Yeah,
that
but Mr.
was...
Kuzic, the judges can arbitrarily, if we put a fee schedule and say, this is what you're charging,
No,
and
they
the
do have
judges
the right,
decide,
they
I am
do have
not going,
discretion.
it doesn't say that on here, and the judges say, I'm not going to charge you $100 instead of $300, and I'm going to charge you nothing pay because you don't have any money, whatever they do, we're taking that away from them by making an ordinance saying you have to charge $300.
Now, Mr.
No,
Lauer,
I don't think that's true.
Well, it's not spelled out in here that you can change the amount due. You're saying it's $300. It's cut and dry. It's
We
a law
are
now.
saying what the courts, as I understand it, have already said.
But they
is that
arbitrarily change it whenever they want
They
to.
don't impose it. Judges
They don't
do.
even impose it, right?
The magistrate judges, or more importantly and more often, it's a sentencing judge who indicates that what the penalties are for a given offense.
Right.
It's up to the clerk of courts to determine what the costs are that are related to that case. As I understand it, our courts have already designated a $300 item. The question that was asked of me originally, and maybe that's the confusion, was who sets these fees? And my conclusion, based upon the Article 2 of the actual Home Rule Charter, is that the county council shall have the following powers, and number 6 says, to establish by ordinance procedures to set the fees charged by all agencies in accordance with the law of the United States and Pennsylvania.
Does that mean all agencies under county's purview? The courts are a different
criminal
branch
division
of
is-
government.
I understand, but that's the way it has been interpreted over time. All of the fees for all of the agencies, including the clerk of
But a
courts.
good attorney or judge could argue the other thing, that it's theirs to set,
I'm sorry?
not ours. A good attorney or judge could argue it's theirs to set, not ours. Because
No,
it's
I don't
ambiguous
know
and gray.
that-
Anytime there's gray, you attorneys know how to get around all that stuff and make it read the way you want it to.
And conversely, somebody who was a slippery attorney, as you've described us, could very well make the argument that since county council never established these fees,
Yeah.
we don't have to pay them.
Well, and half
yeah.
the people don't pay them anyway. So, I mean, here we go. So we'll just call for the vote.
Mr. Geisinger?
No, I think there's a point to what's being said in the respect that the resolution reads, council that it thereby sets the central booking center fee at $300. Okay, that's the resolution. But in the ordinance under imposition says that pay a booking under imposition 1725.5A says that to pay a booking center fee of no more than $300. So I would say that I think in order to make your statement accurate,
No more.
the words "no more" be amended to the resolution.
Okay.
And I would second that as a...
Okay, then I move that the
So-
words "no more" be included as fee at no more than $300.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the resolution from Mr. Geisinger to add at no more than $300. Okay, so we have a motion to amend. Do we have a second on that? Seconded by Mr. Dietz. Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? Can we call for the vote on the amendment?
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Dietz?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferrara?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
And Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
So the amendment passes unanimously. Okay. Any further discussion on the resolution as amended? Okay, there being none, this is a vote on the resolution as amended.
Mr. Dietz?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferrara?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 1.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 1. Okay, so we will add that to the fee schedule. Then the next item under a new business is the introduction of an ordinance titled "An Ordinance Providing for the Allocation of Funds Through the Central Booking Plan Fees to the Designated Central Booking Centers." And at this time, I would need two co-sponsors. Mr. Phillips and Mr. Dietz will be the sponsors for the ordinance. Then the public hearing, debate, and possible vote will be held at the July 20th meeting. And as Mr. Bennell had indicated that he will be discussing this as well at his committee meeting next week. If there's any changes that you would like to discuss at that time, please bring them up. Okay, that's all we had under new business. Is there any other new business to come before council this evening? Okay, there being none, next item is council committee reports. Mrs. Ferraro?
We had quite a busy Economic Development Committee meeting, and one of the things that came forth was the discussion of the council options for the hotel tax of 2005. And the committee voted to go with DCED's resolution for option choice of option 2. And you will be getting a resolution in August for the council to vote on that. But things are going well, and it was another extremely informative and comprehensive meeting, and I thank the department.
Very good. Any other committee reports? Mr. Phillips?
Bridge 102 in Lower Nazareth over Georgetown. Under the tip, PennDOT was involved. I met Tom Kohler today at the bridge, and he was telling me that in 1995 they had their first meetings for the design and the planning of that bridge, and took them 22 years. But it is fine. It's a beautiful bridge. It is up and operational. So we had 3 bridges down in Lower Nazareth, and I was the bane of my household in the neighborhood. And now everybody's happy. We could go through the neighborhood without problems.
All right, good to hear. Wheels of government do move slowly.
And if you want to read anything funny, you should read some of the Facebook posts.
Yeah, when I do like a status report of the bridges, and yeah, man, I get a lot of ribbon from people.
Any other committee reports?
I'd go there.
Okay, council liaison reports? Any liaison reports this evening? There being none. Clerk report? No report. Next, council solicitor, Mr. Lauer.
Just a couple of things. I sent an email to Linda, and I understand she gave it to each of you, indicating that in my preparation for tonight's meeting, I saw that the executive order about which there were some questions about a month ago, and I opined that the executive order was improper, has been amended. I circulated a copy of the amended order. It's my opinion that, well, let me back up. The administrative code at one location provides that where you have single source kinds of products or services, that the non-competitive negotiation method, which is what was used in this case, can be used. And we also have, again, in Article 13 of the Administrative Code, another provision which says that if you're selecting professional services, you must use competitive negotiation. I don't remember ever seeing an occasion where you're really talking about both of those sections applying. I think they both apply in this case, arguably, but I also think, given the language that the executive has used in the amended order, I think the non-competitive negotiation selection process that was used is appropriate, and that's my opinion, and I've indicated that in the email. The second thing I just would like to add is I want to apologize to the extent that we've held anything up with respect to the ADA issues in the silo. The individual in my office, one of the individuals who was actually working on that right after the last meeting, decided to get married and go on a honeymoon, and he's coming back on Monday. So I will make sure that we get you a response as quickly as we can. That's that, and then I just wanted to note that I don't recall Mr. Bennell and Mr. Kraft agreeing so often at any meeting ever. A little concerned about that. In any event, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Any other business to come before council this evening? There being none, do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Bennell, seconded by Mr. Dietz. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Good date. Now, you don't know why I said no? You don't care. Okay, well, that's good. That's the best way to do it.
That might help us.
It's okay. No, I didn't see it.